stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. Father and I went down to camp along with Captain Goodwin, and there we saw the men and boys. As thick as hasty pudding, Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
Hey guys, welcome back to Check Your Leader TV, and today we're going to continue on with our tabletop teaser, the Battle of Freeman's Farm, where I've invited you guys to offer some suggestions for courses of action for both the British and American forces in this refighting of Freeman's Farm using Little War TV's Live Free or Die rules for the American War of Independence. I've had a fair few suggestions, both by email, in Messenger, and in the comment section of this video. Gregory Ward from Wargaming World, one of my favourite channels. I suggest you check out Wargaming World at some stage. He's offered courses of action for the British, as did Norm. Norm emailed me a pretty detailed series of orders for the Brits, how to handle the tactical situation. For the Americans, Vesam, ! And Joseph Goff. I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly, Joseph Goff. We're going to go with your suggestions because they're both quite similar in regards to the Americans. And just for good measure, Jim Johnson offered suggestions for both sides. So having a bet each way. And the thing that's amazing is all these plans are actually quite similar. Some added a little bit more detail than others, but the general thrust is the same. So without further ado, let's roll some dice and play this battle now to its conclusion. At the end of the video, I'll give my thoughts on Live Free or Die, what I think of them as a set of wargaming rules specifically for the American War of Independence. And we'll wrap it up there. So yeah, let's crack on and complete the Battle of Freeman's Farm. Okay, so what are the plans? Well, for the Americans, let's do them first. The plan for the Americans, the combined Council of War has come up with the following plan: to attack and try to drive the British out of Coulter's Farm, to hold Freeman's Farm, and to have Lerner's brigade come up and then come across and try to delay the inevitable arrival of the Hessians on their right, with the advance guard of Morgan's rifles and Dearborn's light infantry to delay and stall in the centre as much as they can. The British plan is to basically attack on the right of the Americans, to demonstrate in the centre, and to use as many of their command points as they possibly can to hasten the arrival of the Hessians on the American right. So that's the overall plan. Where I get free command points to spend for either side, I'll use them to seize moments of opportunity for both sides. So now we'll roll our command dice. It's turn 5. The British are the white, the Americans are the black. We're looking for 5s and 6s for additional command points. And the Americans get 1 and the British get 1. So the Brits will go from 7 command points to 8, and the Americans will go from 5 to 6. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is initiative and command actions. So what is the British? And the Americans have the initiative. Okay, so command-wise, with their 6 orders, Benedict Arnold has given 1 command order to Paul's brigade, because everyone's within 3 inches. He's given 1 order to the advance guard, and he's given 1 order to the brigade, Lerner's brigade, when it arrives. It'll be arriving in this area here. Like I said, I've just put these guys down for convenience sake, but this is Lerner's brigade, and when we get to the movement, this is where they'll come on, and they've got their command point. So he's used 3 orders because he's got 3 brigades, and everyone's within 3 inches. I mean, that's a bit touch and go, but he would have, he could give a 4th one to Dearborn's infantry if they were outside 3 inches. I'll just check that actually. They're within 3, so that's fine. To the Brits, 1 order to this brigade, and 1 order to this brigade, 1 order to this regiment because it's over 3 inches away, and 1 order to these chaps here because they're basically an independent regiment themselves. Okay, so that's all the orders. The commander's actions. There's 3 DMZs on these guys. Burgoyne has 2 stars, so he can remove 2 shock. Or sorry, 2 DMZs, which he does. So remove 2 DMZs, and now we go on to charges. The Brits have none. Just an American charge. So I was going to suggest a charge here by the Americans. However, you need additional command points to initiate charges. So you give command points to move units, but you need additional command points for charges. And for a bayonet charge, for a charge, you need another 2. So a 3 all up. These guys have only got 1. So these guys are going to dodge a bullet because they're only 7 inches, just over 7 inches, 7 inches away. So if they probably would have reached, if they had a charge, they would have probably had a 50-50 chance of catching these guys. So that's charges. We're now going to go on to shooting. Okay, so we're up to firing. 2nd New Hampshire, they are 7 inches away from these loyalists, so they're out of range. Good news, however, for these guys is they're obviously out of range of these skirmishes as well. So, moving on.
The 1st New Hampshire will volley fire into Coulter's Farm.
So that's 12 dice, because you get 2 per base if you volley. But they are hitting on 6s because the British light bobs are in cover. But they do get 2 hits. Out of range, 10 inches actually. Can they hit the gun? Well, I'm going to give them that. That's just at range. That's one base. They can get 1 base at those guys. They're shooting at a deployed artillery piece, so those riflemen will fire with 1 dice. They need a 6 to hit, so that's nothing there. Oh, I almost forgot. Benedict Arnold is attached to these riflemen, so he gets to add his star ratings to their shooting. So they fired with 1. He's got 3 stars, so he gets another 3. They need 6 to hit. None. Okay, so no hits on the cannon from these. Everything else is out of range. Now it's the British firing. 6 bases coming out of the farm, Coulter's Farm. Hitting on 5s and 6s. 2 there. They've already got 3. Another base taken off. The Americans are really getting shot up pretty badly here. And that removes all their DMZs. Well, that's at least removes the problem of DMZs on the 1st New Hampshire. Okay, so the next shot we have, these riflemen shot at the gun at 10 inches, which means the gun is obviously within 10 inches of the skirmishers, which means they can fire, so they will. So it's at close range, so normally it's 2 dice, but they get an extra 2 because it's close range, that's 4, but they are shooting at skirmishers, so they have 4 dice hitting on 6s and no hits on the skirmishers. That's all she wrote for shooting. Now we move up to movement. Okay, so regards to movement, Paul's brigade, Lerner's brigade has come on, and they've just simply come on 9 inches in the case of these troops in column, and 6 inches for the 1st Canadians in line there. These guys can't move because they did volley fire. The Grasshopper, the light 3-pounder, that's moved up, it's full move. The 2nd 4th New York has moved up, wheeled slightly, but they're coming up. Morgan's rifles advanced. towards the British, and in turn the British advanced on them. The Loyalists, for their part, they've moved from, they were here, and they've bolted to over here. And the 2nd New Hampshire, in their movement, they wheeled 6 inches to sort of close off this any kind of flank movement on the Americans. The Loyalists, they skedaddled from here and they've moved over to this, to, get out of the way of these formed infantry here. The British 3-pounder has come up to provide some enfilade fire. The 24th Foot and the 1st Grenadiers have also moved up. And the 20th Foot advanced up to challenge Morgan's rifles. The 21st Foot sidestepped and have picked up a DMZ for their effort. The 9th Foot have simply moving to link up between the 21st and the 62nd, and the Native American Loyalists have broken off and they're heading off to a flank to maybe pitch in to envelop the American position. Burgoyne has joined the 21st Foot, so he can remove some of that DMZ at the beginning of turn 6. So that's why he's there. And Benedict Arnold is remaining with these skirmishers so he can add his 3 stars to their fire. And that is movement. Now we do redressing, and there's none to be done. These guys can't remove shock DMZs because they're within 12 inches of the enemy. The Connecticut militia can't do it because they don't have an officer attached. And the British Lights can't do it because they've got the Americans within 12 inches, so they can't remove the DMZs. These guys, no, the 2nd, 4th can't remove it because they're within 12 inches of the British Light Infantry, so they can't remove their DMZ. And that's it. That's the end of turn 5. So we've rolled for command points. The Americans have got none. The British have got none. The British have 7 command points. The Americans have 5. So for the 7 command points that the Brits have, they've given 1 to the Loyalist Indians, 1 to this brigade, Hamilton's brigade, 1 to Fraser's brigade, and they're going to give the other 4 to attempt to hasten the arrival of the Hessians, because they arrive on a 5 or a 6. Actually, they might as well only give them 3, that way, because a 1 is always a fail. So 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, so anything but a 1, and that leaves them 1, which they will give to these guys here, because they're 3 inches away from anyone, and they need that. For the Americans, they have 5. They've given 1 to the independent 2nd New Hampshire because they're over 3 inches away from somebody. They've given 1 to the 2nd, 4th New York. 1 to Morgan, just in case he needs to move his boys. 1 to Dearborn, and 1 to Lerner's Brigade. So that's their 5. So that's all the command points allocated. After allocation of command points, the next thing is leader initiatives or leader actions, and we only have 1 to do, which is General Burgoyne. He has 2 stars, so he can remove 2 DMZs. He does that. That's all the leader initiatives done. So now it's a roll for initiative. Let's see who has the initiative. The British are white. The British have the initiative this turn. When we get to movement, we'll roll to see if the Hessians arrive. Okay, so charge declarations. There are none. So the first thing that happens is shooting. So turn 6, and we are going to start firing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fire the British cannon. As you can see, the riflemen are within 45-degree arc. So it's 2 dice for a cannon, for a field gun, and then a double another 2 dice because it's close range. So that's 4 dice all up. They're shooting at skirmishes, so they need a 6 to hit and 1 hit. So that's 1 hit on the rifleman. Next is going to be the 20th foot, and also might as well do the 21st at the same time. They're all going to fire at the same target, and they're going to volley fire. So when you volley fire, it's 2 dice per stand. That just means that they can't move. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 9. That's a grand total of 18 dice. So 18 dice ripping down the line. That's going to, but they are shooting at skirmishes, so they're going to need 6s to hit. So it's 18 dice, but I forgot Burgoyne adds his 2 dice. That's 20 dice, needing 6s. Let's see what they get here. Well, there's the roll. 1, 2, 3 hits. So that'll take them up to another 4. You never let a chance go by, so now the little 3-pounder is going to kick in, and he's going to fire his 2 dice across at Morgan's light infantry, because if you can get 1 more hit on them, it will take a base off, and maybe we might get Benedict Arnold. So 2 dice, needing 6s. Oh, and there's 1 6. So that'll remove a base, which means we roll another dice, and if we get a 1, that is a hit. There's a possible chance of knocking over Benedict Arnold. Oh, so close. It was a 2. But they do lose a base of infantry. Now, because firing is simultaneous, before I move on, and before I remove their base, I'll get them to do their shot. So they've got 6 bases. They'll put 3 and 3 onto those British units. So the first 3 will be at the 20th foot. They need 5s and 6s. There's 1 hit on the 20th foot, and then 3 shots into the 21st foot, and nothing on them. So it's 1 hit on the 21st. The 20th. Okay, now we can take the base away, and let's continue on with some shooting. We'll now go to the firefight around Coulter's Farm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 bases of British light infantry in there. They're going to be shooting out at the 2nd New Hampshire. 6 shots hitting on 5s and 6s. They've got 1 hit on the 1st New Hampshire. They will now shoot back into Coulter's Farm, and they'll volley fire. Okay, so there's 5 bases. That's 10 dice, but they're hitting on 6s. 1. So they've taken 1 hit and they've given 1 hit. Okay, which seems to make a lot of sense. So that's another hit on the light bulbs. I did forget to add Benedict Arnold's 2 dice when they were shooting here, so I'll just throw them in now. Well, that's another hit. So the 20th foot. Oh, I should have allocated. Let's say it's even. It's the 20th. It is. It's the 20th foot. So that's 2 hits on them. It's not. Benedict Arnold doesn't have 2 stacks; it has 3. So I'll throw a 3rd die. 4. It's a miss. Okay, so still just the 1 hit. Is there any more shooting? Yes. The little grasshopper. He will shoot his 2 dice
I'll have to be straight back at the British gun. That's closer to the front. So we'll fire at them. I could shoot across at the these guys are within arc as well. So odds, evens. It's even, so he's going to shoot across at the 24th with his 2 dice. And that's 2 hits, double 6. So 2 hits, that's 1, and I'll get another marker. And finally, the Americans could put in a hasty volley from these guys. Well, they could put in a volley into these guys, but I do want them to move. So they'll fire a hasty volley before they move. So they'll get all but this end base. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 shots. Actually, maybe they should go for it. Maybe they should pour in a real volley into there. I think we will. So that'll give them 10. And they'll hit on 6s. Well, they got 1. So they went close. Okay, I'll mark them with smoke and then we'll move on. So that's all the shooting done. Now we go to movement. Now we roll to see if the Hessians arrive. So anything but a 1 and they're going to come on. And they've arrived. So now we'll go straight into movement. We'll start with the British movement because they obviously have the initiative, and including in that British movement is the Hessian movement. So these Hessian regiments are coming up in columns, 2 either side of this road, 1 down this road, moving 9 inches. The gun's limbered and it's coming down this road. The skirmishers have just gone forward a full 12 inches, as has the Hessian commander. Other movement for the Brits, the Indians, they moved in through and across the stream. The 62nd and the 9th Foot have moved up. Obviously those units that volley fire didn't move at all. 24th have come up, as have the Converged Grenadiers, and the Loyalists have moved forward to start to get into skirmish range of the Americans. Now we'll go on with American movement. We'll have a look at the American movement. Obviously there was none here. The 3-pounder have moved back. Now the rules state that the guns can only move when they're limbered, but my little house rule, if it's a 3-pounder or below, that gun is so light it could easily move and fire. So I permit 3-pounders and below to actually move and fire. So he's moved back. The 2nd New Hampshire have done a formation change. They've moved into a double line, so they've picked up an extra DMZ for that. But they're doing that because Morgan's rifles have pulled back. Benedict Arnold has attached himself to the 2nd 4th New York. Dearborn has refused, basically moved back to assist with delaying the arrival of the Hessians, and also we're a little bit concerned about those Indians. We're always going to be concerned about Indians in the stream and in the woods. The Connecticut militia have moved out of the Freeman's farm and into the field, and they've picked up an extra DMZ for that. But the Americans need to have something over here to get ready to slow down those Hessians, and I think Benedict Arnold will have time to get across over here before the Hessians arrive and sort these fellas out. The 1st Canadians have moved into this broken ground here. They've moved outside their frontal arc, so they've picked up a DMZ for that. And finally, the 8th Massachusetts have moved into Freeman's farm and are garrisoning it, and that's a formation change, so they've picked up a DMZ. Now we go to redressing, and those units outside of 6 inches can now outside of 12 inches, can remove any DMZs that they have. So these guys can't remove any because obviously they're hotly contested by these Americans. These fellas, there's no one near them, so they can remove one. If they were elite, they could remove two, so they'll take one away. Moving now on along the line, these guys can remove one. In the movement phase for the Brits, obviously Burgoyne is going to move to these chaps here, because he's not going to get over to those guys in time. So that's all the redressing of ranks for the Brits. That's all they can do. And now for the Americans, let's have a look. Nothing here. These guys can, and these guys can. And again, the militia, they have to have an officer attached and be outside 12 inches of the enemy to remove any DMZs. So that ends turn 6 with the arrival of the Hessians. Lots of readjustment of the lines for the Americans and some vicious firefights going on. We'll remove all the smoke and then we'll go on to the start of turn 7. Okay, so now with the arrival of the Germans, the Brits get an additional 2 dice because the lieutenant, the leader of the Hessians, he adds another 2 dice. So now the Brits are going to be rolling red dice. They got 4, and the Americans have their 3 stars, and so they roll 3. And we'll again, as usual, looking for 5s and 6s. Okay, so the Brits get another 2, and the Americans get none. So the Brits will have a grand total of 9 command points, and Benedict Arnold will have his 5. Command point allocation for the Americans. 1 to the independent 2nd New Hampshire, because they're over 3 inches away from the rest of Paws Brigade. 1 for Paws Brigade in here. 1 for Leonard's Brigade, these guys here. There'll be no command points allocated to these chaps. Oh, actually, they're within 3, so that's fine. But these guys are certainly on their own. And Learner's Brigade is all within 3 inches, so they're fine. And a command point spent on Dearborn and 1 for Morgan. As for the British, they get 1 given to the independent loyalists over here, 1 for the light infantry, 1 for Fraser's Brigade, which is the gun in these 2 regiments here, 1 for Hamilton's Brigade. They're all within 3 inches, and these Indians are just over 3 inches, so 1 for those loyalists, those loyal Native Americans, and then finally 1 over here for this Hessian battalion, and 1 here for the remainder of the Hessian Brigade. So that's all the command initiatives used, command points allocated. Now we do commanders' initiatives. Benedict Arnold, he has 3 stars, so he can remove 2 shock. So they're all off the 2nd, 4th New York. And Burgoyne has 2 stars, so he'll remove the shock from the 20th foot. So we've done our command point allocation. We've done our commanders' actions. Now we go to initiative. So the British will be rolling a red die. The Americans black. Double 6. So it's tied. Let's roll again. Okay, the British have the initiative. And the first thing we do, obviously there are no charge declarations. Not enough command points were allocated for that. So it's firing. So we'll start with the British firing. And we will start from the right and move across. So the first shooting is going to be these chaps here. Are they within range? So they have a range of 6 inches. They will get 2 bases. So 2 bases from the Loyalists. Nope, no hits. Moving on now to the British Combined Light Infantry in Coulter's Farm. All right, all the firings can been completed now. For the British, the only firing was from the gun and the combined light infantry in here. They did score a couple of hits on the 1st New Hampshire, and the gun didn't score any hits at all. In return, there was fire from the 2nd New Hampshire on the skirmish line. They got a hit. Fire from the 1st New Hampshire, no hits at all. They rolled 10 dice and didn't get a single 6. The little 3-pounder, she had a shot and got 1 hit on the 24th. And that's all the shooting. So now we're going to go straight into movement. British movement first. They have the initiative. So the Loyalists, they stepped back, moved back. The 3-pounder completely pivoted and changed its facing. So consequently, I've given them a DMZ, and they're facing now towards the right flank. The Converged Grenadiers and the 24th Foot, they have simply wheeled and moved forward, whereupon Burgoyne has ridden over and joined the 24th. The British regiments, the 20th and the 21st, have moved through that rough ground going there, and they've picked up a DMZ for their troubles. The other 2 regiments from Hamilton's brigade are now moving through this bad going here, and picked up some DMZs. And the Hessians have moved across. They're moving up. It's slow going for them, except for these chaps. They've been able to go across a ford, so they've gone a full 9. The other 2 battalions, they've only gone 4.5 inches. Reason being, they are crossing. They're just crossing the river, so it's half movement them. The gun, however, limbered, gone a full 9 inches over the bridge, and the Jaegers have moved a full 12 inches across the stream because, hey, they're in skirmish order, so they're not slowed down. As for the Americans, Dearborn's infantry has moved off to the right to try and delay the Hessians. And we have Lerner's brigade continuing to advance around, heading towards where the Hessians are. And these chaps have basically they're continuing to advance. So they're wheeled and they're coming around to try to threaten the British right flank. So that's all the movement. I've also done the redressing, so I've removed any DMZs I can for the redressing phase. That ends turn 7, and now we're going to move on to turn 8. And as you can see, basically the Americans are now getting pressured all along their front, and the Hessians are going to try and push in on the right. For the Americans, they're doing everything they can to cover off their right flank and hold on there. And Benedict Arnold has moved across because he's going to remove 3 DMZs from these guys, and probably if he can get enough command points, try to launch an assault into Coulter's Farm. But like I said, it's three command points just to launch a bayonet charge with a single battalion. Right, let's go on to turn 8. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to skip forward now until turn 10. Basically from turn 8 through to 10, most of the game revolved around manoeuvring. So Hamilton's brigade in the British centre continued to advance slowly through the broken ground, the stream near the mill, with 2 battalions going to the right and 2 battalions going to the left, and basically coming around the mill. On the British right, Fraser's brigade, essentially the 24th Foot, those dogged Welshmen, and the combined Grenadiers advanced towards the centre of the American position between Coulter's Farm and the mill, focusing predominantly with an advance towards Freeman's farm. The British light bobs continued to hold out inside Coulter's farm, with the Loyalist skirmishers providing fire support on their right, and then falling back progressively to the rear of Coulter's farm. On the right-hand side for the Americans, the Hessians in a series of columns came across the creek via the bridge and the ford, or simply two of the battalions in columns quickly moved across the creek. The 6-pounder, the German 6-pounder, provided fire support, and the Jaegers skirmished in the centre. It's also worth pointing out that the Native American loyalists basically continued to try to link up between Hamilton's brigade and the Hessians. For the Americans, Pauw's brigade pretty much stayed where they were from when they first came onto the battlefield, with the two New Hampshire regiments firing heavily into Coulter's farm to try to dislodge the British light bobs, and the Connecticut militia remaining in the fields around Freeman's farm, essentially not able to do much because being militia, every time they moved through disordering terrain, they picked up a DMZ, and they couldn't remove that DMZs without the help of Benedict Arnold, who spent most of his time moving between the advance guard, consisting of Morgan's Rifles and Dearborn's Light Infantry, and the two New Hampshire regiments. Leonard's brigade, for its part, continued to move up the centre of the road, then turning right and trying to cover off and screen the advance of the Hessians. The continued advance of Hamilton's brigade, however, caused them to have to drop off battalions on their route of march to confront the advancing British. So let's pick it up now at turn 10 and see how things progress from that point onwards. And the significance for the British is now, with the arrival of Riedesell's brigade, those Hessians are going to add 2 extra command dice to the British roll. So they're going to go up from 2 to 4. Okay, so the Brits have gained 3. So they'll go from 7 to 10. Americans have gained 2, so they go from 5, 6 to 7. 7 to 10 for the command points, and now we'll allocate those command points. Now, turn 10 was a very interesting move, because now we see the Americans launching their New Hampshire regiments into Coulter's farm to drive out the British light infantry. They've given 3 to the 2nd New Hampshire, 3 to the 1st New Hampshire, so they're going to be launching bayonet charges, launching charges into Coulter's farm. 1 to Leonard's brigade, because they need to manoeuvre up. The Brits and Hessians, 1 here to the volunteers, the loyalists. 4 to the 24th Foot, or in other words, Hamilton's, Fraser's brigade. 1 to Hamilton's brigade. 1 to the each of these independent battalions, which is the 62nd and the 9th. 1 to the Loyalist Indians, and 1 to the Hessians, because everyone is within 3 inches, so 1 is enough to get them to move. So that's all the command initiatives done. The command points allocated. Now we roll for initiative. And the British have the initiative. So, straight after initiative, leader actions. So, Benedict Arnold, he has 3 stars, so he's going to remove 2 DMZs. Easy peasy. And 2 DMZs have been removed from the 20th Foot by Burgoyne, so they're down to 1. Now, I was making a mistake here in the rules. Units that move through terrain that causes complications, if they have a leader attached, they don't pick up DMZs. So unfortunately, General Burgoyne was removing DMZs from units that hadn't actually, or shouldn't have actually, accrued DMZs. And now good old Frederick Adolf von Riestel. He's got 2 stars, so he's going to remove 2 DMZs from these chaps. So that's all the leader actions done. And the next thing that happens is charges. The Brits have the initiative, so they will declare their charges. So they're declaring a bayonet charge with a 24th foot onto the 2nd 4th New York. And for the Americans, they're going to launch charges, not bayonet charges. They don't get bayonet charges. That's a thing peculiar to the Brits. They just launch normal charges, and it's going to be both the 1st New Hampshire and 2nd New Hampshire with a charge onto the British in Coulter's Farm. Okay, so to launch a charge, you need to roll 2d6 to see if you reach first. So they're 4 inches away, so you roll 2d6, and that's how far they go. So if I roll 4 or better, they will hit the Americans. If they roll 3, they'll move that distance, or less than 4, they'll move that distance, and they'll pick up a DMZ for their troubles. So let's see how far they go. Okay, they've rolled 9, so they easily make it. But before they go, the Americans will fire a hasty volley at them as they come in. There's 7 bases, hitting on 5s and 6s. 1, 2. So that's 2 hits. So they've currently got 1 DMZ. They'll go up to a grand total of 3 now. And then they charge in. Now, I could choose, well, no, they won't hit the gun, but they'll go very close to it. So there's their 3 DMZs as they go in. The Americans also get closing fire from this gun as well. So that's another 4 dice, actually. So they could cause some more damage yet. So they fire in support of them. So we'll just mark them with smoke to remind us that they've fired. And 5s and 6s. Okay, so that's another hit. So that's another DMZ, 1 short of taking a base off. Ooh, okay, so now we do the American charges. I'm not going to roll, I can't roll in less than 2 inches. The way I play it for built-up areas, I assume that these British are all through this area here. That's less than 2 inches to touch that. That's less than 2 inches to touch that, so they don't have to roll for the charge. They're in. But I'm going to let the light bulbs shoot out. There's 5 bases. They'll be hitting on 5s and 6s. They'll pour the fire onto the 2nd New Hampshire because Benedict Arnold is there, and that's probably the main threat. And they will get supporting fire from this gun onto these guys. So the 5 onto these chaps from the light bulbs. That's 1 hit, so they pick up 1 there. And the gun, it's not short range. It's just 2 dice hitting on 5s and 6s. And 1 hit on them, so they pick up a 2nd DMZ. Okay, so now these guys go charging in, and these chaps go charging in as well, and Benedict Arnold's in the fight as well. So that's all the charge declarations done. So now we move on to firing. Now on with the firing, and the first sort of firing we've got is Morgan's rifles. So there's 5 bases there. They're shooting at the 62nd foot, and they'll be hitting on 5s and 6s, and 2 hits, which is not enough to remove the base, but it's very close. We've got these guys here, and we've got the head of this column. So a head of a column shooting at them, hitting on a 6, close but no cigar, shooting back with 2 dice, hitting on 5s and 6s. Ooh, 2 hits. Native Americans inflict some pretty accurate skirmish fire on the 9th Massachusetts. They're going to fire 1 skirmisher into these skirmishers. That's a miss. They'll shoot back. Ooh, and they get a hit on the Native Americans. Okay, so it's obviously self-evident that Dearborn's light infantry has gone over the preceding turns has moved a considerable distance, and they've basically gone from that advanced guard position that was in front of Freeman's farm, and they've come all the way around to the right flank to attempt to hold up the Hessians. Okay, so now we'll look at the movement phase. For the British, these guys have simply changed their facing, and as has the gun. No movement here from these British regiments. They thought better of it. But Morgan's rifles have stepped forward to close the range. The 2nd Massachusetts have formed line behind Morgan's rifles. The 9th Massachusetts has formed line. Obviously, all these formation changes are picking up DMZs. The Hessians, on the whole, have advanced. The gun has, it's basically, because it's been masked now, it's just preparing to move off. Dearborn's light infantry have moved back into this tree line here. Movement of commanders. Burgoyne has joined the 62nd Foot because they're pretty badly shot up. Benedict Arnold is obviously staying in the fight with the 1st New Hampshire. That leaves good old Frederick Adolph. And he is... he's going to go to the gun because they have 2 DMZs on them. Okay, so now we're up to the melee phase. So we're going to go through it step by step, and you can see how it works. So essentially, for every 2 bases in the combat, you get 2 dice. 1 dice for every 2 bases. And then there's a whole bunch of cumulative modifiers, but you're always guaranteed at least 1d6. So let's start with the 2nd, 4th New York. Pardon me. For each training class above the opponent, well, they're class 3, and the Brits, the 24th, are class 2, so they don't get that. They're not defending a field work or a built-up area. They're not a British bayonet charge or a cavalry charge. They're not defending minor terrain. For a leader attached, you would get as many dice as he has stars. If the unit has more DMZs than the opponent, it's a -1. So that's not them. And it's -3 D6 if they're in skirmish formation. So essentially, they just get 1 D6 for every 2 bases. So 1, 2, 3, rounding down. So they've got their 3 dice. For the Brits, same. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they get 3 dice. And again, each training class, they're class 3. These are class 2. So they get 3 dice for that. They get 3 dice for a British bayonet charge, which is exactly what they've launched. So they get 3 for that. They're not defending. They don't have a leader attached. They have more DMZs than the Americans, so they lose 1 D6. So it's a grand total of 8 to 3. All right, so what we'll do is we'll roll these dice simultaneously, and the Americans will be the orange, and the British will be the black. So we're looking for 5s and 6s. So the Americans get 1, the British get 1, 2. So it's a difference of 2 to 1. And then we just simply consult the melee results table. And if it's a difference, okay, so it's a +1 to 3, successful action, suffer 2 DMZs and halt. So the Brits will lose a base. They'll end up with 1 DMZ, and they'll halt. -1 to 3, driven back, suffer 2 MZs and 1 casualty. Retreat a full move or behind the nearest friendlies. So they'll go a full move back. So driven back is the result for the Americans, and a successful charge for the Brits. Now the consequences of this will trigger some other dice rolling. For example, the Brits have lost a base, so they have to do a morale check for losing a base. And the Americans have to do a morale check because they lost the base. They also would have to do one just for retreating. So, so we'll do the morale check for the Brits first. They're at class 2, so they get 3 dice, and they need just a 5 or 6 on one of the dice. And they've got a 5 or 6 and 3. So they've passed, no problem at all. And now the Americans, they only get 2 dice because they're a 3rd class unit. And they've got a 6, so they've passed. Now, any units within 3 inches that are at the same class or lower also have to test. Now, the 8th Massachusetts, in this built-up area here in Freeman's Farm, they have to do a test because they're within 3 inches of a friend who's retreating. And so they do their test now as well. And they roll double 6, so they've passed. So that's all that done. We completed that melee and all the consequential dice rolling. And so now we'll do the melee for Coulter's Farm. And so now we do the fight for Coulter's Farm. And once you've added up all the bases and the modifiers, we get a result where the Brits, with only 4 bases, but they are defending a built-up area, and they are quality 1, versus the grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 bases of Americans with Benedict Arnold in support. It ends up 7 dice each. The Americans did have a slight advantage in dice, but they are carrying more DMZs than the British. So, 7 dice each, looking for 5s and 6, and the British are black. Okay, so the Americans have got, 1, 2, 3, 4. They've got 4, and the Brits got 2. That is a difference of 2 plus. So 2 plus, if we have a look here, we'll see that it's the same result as the last battle, that last melee that we had. So these Brits are going to be thrown out of Coulter's Farm. So the light bulbs have been driven out. They need a 5 or a 6 on 4 dice, on one of these 4 dice to pass their morale test. And they've got 2 6s, so they've passed there, no worries at all. And that basically ends the turn, other than doing redressing. Any units outside 12 inches can remove DMZs. I'll do that, and then we'll move on to turn 11. Okay, a mistake here by me in regards to the rules. Whenever a unit is forced to retreat, the first unit that it encounters, friendly unit that it encounters, within 3 inches, if it is the same or an inferior quality of training, automatically takes 3 DMZs. It's not dice for, it's just an automatic penalty, 3 DMZs. As per usual, British are the red dice. So they've got 1 success, and the Americans have 1 success. So it's going to be 8 to 6 for orders. We'll now allocate the Americans with their 6 command points. They've given 1 to this battalion here. They've given 1 to Morgan's Rifles, another 1 to the 2nd Massachusetts from Lerner's Brigade, and 1 to Dearborn's Light Infantry. That's only 4, but there's really not much point moving anything else at this point, I don't think, for the Americans. For the Brits, they've given 1 to the Hessians, 1 to this independent Hessian battalion because they're over 3 inches away. 4 to the 24th because they're going to charge again, and 1 to each of these battalions here. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's it for the Brits. Now it's a simple roll for initiative. British are red, and the Brits have the initiative. Command actions. Okay, so Benedict Arnold will move 3 from the 1st New Hampshire. And of course, we have Burgoyne, he's removing 2 from the 62nd foot, and Friedrich Adolf will remove 1 from the gun, and that's all the command actions done. Now it's charge declarations. The British have the initiative. They will declare a charge here. These are obviously 6 inches away because they retreated 6 inches. So the Brits, they go 10, so they will reach. That means they get closing fire from 4th, 2nd New York. So there is 6 bases this time because they've lost 1 from the previous melee. And they get 2 hits on the Brits as they go charging forward. That gives them 3 DMZs, and now they will close on the 2nd, 4th. Okay, so now we're into firing. 4 shots here, needing 6s. No hits at all, lots of 1s. Okay, the gun, close range, firing canister, needing 6s, but with 4 dice. And they get 1 hit. And we're going to put that on to the 2nd New Hampshire. Volley fire from the light bulbs. So there's 3 bases, so that's 6 dice, but they'll need 6s to hit. And 1 hit, so that's going to be 1 DMZ on the 1st New Hampshire. Moving along, we might as well do the American shooting out now. It's skirmish fire coming out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6. So 11 shots all up coming out, and we'll divide them equally. So we'll go 4, 3, 4. I guess. So 4 here first, 2 hits, 3 on the gun, no hits at all, and then another 4, and 2 hits on the light bulbs, which will take another base off them. And that means they have to do a morale check immediately. 4 dice, because they are first grade troops. And there's a 5, so they pass. They are holding in there desperately. Okay, the little 3-pounder, 4 dice at the combined grenadiers, because it's close range. 1 hit. Moving along. Okay. The Brits will get a volley from the 62nd into Morgan's rifles. So they're just at 6 inches. There's a volley. So 8 dice, hitting on 6s. 2 hits on Morgan's rifles. The next shooting is going to be... well, let's do Morgan's rifles back at them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 hitting on 5s and 6s. Oh, 2 hits. That's pretty good shooting. Well, the 3rd Massachusetts will fire a volley as well. It's 10 dice hitting on 6s as they fire at the Native Americans. Not a single hit. So many times I see that happen. Okay, now the Native Americans will fire back. 3 dice hitting on 5s and 6s. No hits there. And that is all the shooting, because everybody else is outside of range. Now it's going to be movement. Now, for movement, these 2 British regiments moved up. They've inclined slightly, they've wheeled. The 9th have sidestep, and they've picked up an extra DMZ. So where appropriate, units that have that need to pick up DMZs have, as you see, one extra here and another one there. The Hessians have advanced all along their line. For the Americans, 2nd Massachusetts is sidestep because they can see that the flank of the Morgan's rifles are being threatened. And that's it. That's it for the Americans. That was the only movement there. They had a movement command point, but they're not going to use it. They're in a pretty good position. Why come out of the cover? The Germans are coming. And one last bit of movement. Morgan's rifles have stepped back. They've got rifles, so they're going to use that range to the best advantage so that they can shoot at the Brits and the Brits can't shoot at them. So over 6, but not beyond 10. They don't want to go too far back, though, because that will leave the 9th Massachusetts exposed. So, yeah, it's all becoming a bit of a schmozzle for the Americans here. Oh, another piece of movement I forgot. The 2nd New Hampshire have come out of the Bertie Way. They're leaving it purely for the 1st to hold on to. So they've come out of Coulter's Farm. They've formed line outside of Coulter's Farm because of the threat in the centre now. Commander movements, Benedict Arnold has joined the 2nd New Hampshire, so he can remove all those DMZs. Burgoyne's staying where he is because this unit has 4 DMZs and he needs to get some off. And the Hessian commander has just moved forward to add his weight to the Reutz battalion because if they can get a charge in, they'll probably put in a charge if they get enough command points to do that. So that's all the movement done. Let's move on to the melee phase. Okay, so we go through the melee procedure here now. It's 1 dice per 2 bases for mass. So it's 1, 2, 3 for the Americans, and there's nothing else going for them. The Brits, they have done 1 base per 2, so they get 3. They've done a bayonet charge, so they get another 3. What else do they get? Oh, and each training level. These guys are class 2, they're class 3, so that's another 3. But they lose 1 because the Brits have more DMZs than the Americans. So it's a grand total of 3 versus 8. 5s and 6s is what counts. And the Americans get 1 hit. And the Brits get only 2. So again, it is a difference of +1, -1. For the Brits, a successful action, suffer 2 MZs and halt, so they're going to lose a base. So that's it for them. The Americans, -1, driven back, suffer 2 MZs and 1 casualty. So 2 DMZs, 1 casualty, so they lose another base. And driven back, so they go 6 inches, which will drive them through Freeman's farm. All right. Okay, so they go back 6 inches, okay, which will place them in Freeman's farm or beyond. I suspect they have to go behind. So that will, because they're interpenetrating friends, they pick up another DMZ, which removes another base. So they have to do the morale check first for being defeated in close combat. They're class 3, so they only get 2 dice. They need a 5 and a 6. Oh, got a 1 and 2. They failed that. So they continue to retreat. So that will take them 12 inches back. But they also lose another base now because they've interpenetrated friends, which gives them another DMZ. That takes care of all the DMZs, but they need to lose another base. And they have to do the test again. And that'll take them off the table. Now, these guys have to do a morale check because they lost a base. They're 2nd class, so they get 3 dice. Looking for a 5, just a single 5 or 6 on the dice. Okay, they got 2. Okay, they only need 1, so they've passed. So the 24th Foot, I think they're the Welsh Border Regiment. They're still in the fight as well.
Right.
And that ends the melee. What a brutal melee it was. And now we just have to do... So no units were in a position to do any self-redressing, so we just move on to the next turn. Okay, so we've rolled for command points. The Americans get +1, so they're now 6. The Brits got all 4, so they go from 7 to 11. So now let's allocate command points. Okay, so let's look at the allocation of command points. There's 6 that the Americans have. 1 Benedict Arnold and the 2nd New Hampshire. 1 to the 2nd Massachusetts. 1 to Morgan's Rifles. 1 to the 9th Massachusetts. 1 to Dearborn's Light Infantry. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the 6th is to the 1st Canadians, because they're probably going to have to turn around and come back to cover off on this road exit point here, which is a victory point for the Brits. For the British, they've given 1 to what's left of the combined light infantry, probably just to get out of harm's way. They've given 4 to the combined grenadiers. They want to launch a bayonet charge on the gun. 1 to Hamilton's brigade, and then 1 to each of the independent units from Hamilton's brigade. So 1 here and 1 there, and 3 to the Hessians under where we have the Hessian commander, because they're going to attempt a bayonet charge on the 9th Massachusetts. Okay, let's now roll for it. The British are red, and the Americans have the initiative. Command initiatives, Benedict Arnold has 3. He's going to remove all these DMZs from the 2nd New Hampshire. For the Brits, Burgoyne removes 2 DMZs, and that's it for command initiatives. Now we go, leader actions, I should call them. Next, we go to charges. All right, the British, they are 7 inches away. They need a 7 on 2d6. They've got an 8, so they're going to reach the gun. The gun gets to give closing fire, so that will be at close range. So 4 dice, hitting on 5s and 6s. 2 hits. So the Grenadiers will now be up at 3 DMZs, but they will hit that gun. And I seriously doubt that that gun's going to be able to withstand a bayonet charge by a combined Grenadier unit. So the next charge we have is over here, and again it's 7 inches, so do 2d6, and they just make it. So closing fire from the 9th Massachusetts. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bases, and they'll hit on 6s, 5s and 6s, 2 6s, so they get 2 hits. So that's 2 DMZs on these guys as they go in. Now it's worth noting that if you charge through skirmishes, you don't pick up a DMZ. Any other inner penetration, DMZs, but if you move through skirmishes, then you get no DMZs, which is fortunate because they have 2 DMZs there. The 9th have 3, so they will not lose a dice in combat for inner penetrating. And basically this is going to be quite even. Okay, so we've done all the firing now across the entire battlefield. There was a couple of disruption DMZs poured on from the fire out of here, and also one onto these light bulbs. In return, the Brits put 2 disruption or two demoralizations, 2 DMZs on these guys in this built-up area, which is the 1st New Hampshire. They had a shot as they came in also, but they didn't get any hits. Here, the Brits poured in a volley, and they got 2 hits on the 8th Massachusetts. In return, the fire that came out of this built-up area and from the two bases of the 2nd Massachusetts scored 2 hits on the 24th foot. Morgan's rifles fired another 2 hits on the 62nd and 1 hit on the 20th. And then finally some firing between the Jaegers and Dearborn's light infantry, with the Jaegers getting the better of it, getting 2 hits on Dearborn and none in return. So now we'll move on to movement. Okay, so we've done all the movement. Basically, the light bulbs fell back. The 2nd New Hampshire have wheeled towards the Brits. All the British battalions have moved up, and where appropriate have picked up another DMZ. And essentially for the Americans, apart from the 2nd New Hampshire who were doing their wheel, Dearborn's light infantry has simply fallen back. I almost forgot to mention the 1st Canadians. They have done an about face and moved off, grovelling on at 3 inches, picked up a DMZ for their effort. And now we're going to go on with the Malays. Well, this one here should be fairly straightforward. Okay, so the Brits get 1, 2 for mass. They get 3 for a bayonet charge, and they get 3 because they're 1 training level higher, but they lose 1 because they have more DMZs than the gun, and the gun gets 1 dice. So we're looking at 5s and 6s. The gun has inflicted 1 hit. Brave gunners as they go down, but they've taken 2. So I'm going to put that down as the gun being overrun. I can't see how an artillery piece can recoil away. So that gun is knocked out, which means these guys have to do a morale check. They're level 2, but they have Benedict Arnold attached to them, so they get another 3 dice. So 6 dice all up, needing just a 5 or a 6 on one of them. And they've got a 6 there and a 4, so they pass, no worries. And that's the gun gone. So the other Malay is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 2 dice, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 dice. They have their lieutenant with them. He adds another 2 dice, the Hessian commander. That's it. They lose a dice because they have more DMZ, so it's 4-1, and we're looking for 5s and 6s. It's 1 each. So they both take a DMZ in that case. So the difference is a 0, and locked in combat, remain locked in melee, and both sides suffer 1 DMZ and a casualty. So another 1 DMZ each. They both receive a casualty. So that's a base gone from each. Formed infantry do not suffer the casualty if facing cavalry or facing a bayonet charge or defending a field work or if defending field works. Okay, so they were facing a bayonet charge, so they don't receive a casualty. So these guys have to do a morale check to see if they fight on. They need a 5 or a 6. They've got a 5, so they continue to fight. And now we have to roll to see if their leader is knocked off his horse, and a 1. No, he's rolled a 3, so he's still there. We fight again. The odds are the same as before. Nothing's really changed. Now the second round of melee. Okay, 3 hits from the Germans, none from the Americans. So that is a difference of 3. Driven back. Suffer 2 DMZs. So that would take them up to a grand total of 6, which means it leaves 1. They lose 2 bases. And must do a morale check. So they'll go back 6 inches. So these guys now have to do a morale check. 2 dice. They need a 5 or a 6 to pass.
We got a 3 and a 4. Okay, so they've failed. They go back 6 inches. They go tumbling back to here. Okay, now that brings it within 3 inches of the second Massachusetts. These are all high morale grades, both here and here, so they don't have to do any other morale checks. Okay, that just leaves redressing, and the only unit that's outside of 12 inches of any enemy, the 9th, they've removed 1 DMZ, and that ends turn 12, and we move on to turn 13. So, start of a new turn. The Brits have picked up 3, the Americans have picked up 3, so it's going to be 8 to 10 for command points. Okay, so for the Americans, they've given 3 to the 2nd New Hampshire. They're going to launch a bayonet charge on the British Grenadiers because they can't hit them. They'll hit them first, so they'll go for the British Grenadiers. They're also going to give 3 to the 2nd Massachusetts. They're going to attempt a bayonet charge on the 20th foot because they want to save the 9th Massachusetts. And they've given 1 to the Canadians and 1 to Dearborn's light infantry. So that's all their command points given up. The Brits, they're going to launch a bayonet charge into Freeman's Farm with the 24th foot. A bayonet charge, not a British bayonet charge, but just a normal bayonet charge from the 21st, the Fusiliers, onto the 2nd Massachusetts, and a bayonet charge on the into the side of what's left of the 9th Massachusetts. So basically the Brits are going hard and fast with a British bayonet charge here and just normal bayonet charges with these guys here. They're just going for broke now. They're hoping that they can burst through and drive off all these Americans in the centre. Command actions. General Burgoyne has removed 2 shock from the 62nd foot, and von Riesel has removed 2 shock from Battalion Retz. And Benedict Arnold has no DMZs to have to remove, so no command initiatives there. So now it's initiative, and the British are red, and the Brits have the initiative. So we'll start with this British charge here. It's I'm going to say 5 inches to engage, and they've rolled 7. So these guys will go in, and they'll get closing fire from these guys. But let's just put them forward going. They're stepping off. The next charge is here. It's 6 inches to reach the 2nd Massachusetts on 2d6. 8 they've reached. So they get closing fire from these guys. So they go stepping forward. And finally, these guys charging them. It's point blank. I can't roll less than 1 on 2d6, so they'll charge into them. And finally, we have the Americans here charging the British Grenadiers. It's not a flank charge because the bulk of the regiment is not behind the flank of these guys. So they'll charge in, then wrap round. The distance, well, it's over 2 inches, so they need 3 on 2d6, but anything but cat's eyes. Okay, they've reached, so they'll go in, and the Brits will get closing fire on them. So now let's resolve the closing fire. Okay, so 5 dice, hasty volley. Okay, so 1 hit on the Americans as they go in. 5 dice coming out of the built-up area. 1 hit. Okay, and then 5 dice coming from the 2nd Massachusetts. No hits at all. Okay, and these guys won't get a shot onto the 20th foot. All right. Okay, so the next thing is shooting. there's 4 dice here and 4 from the cannon, so the Brits have all got 8 dice coming into this built-up area, and they've got only hitting on 6s, so they've only got 1 hit. So 1 hit on those chaps there, and the Americans have got 5 shots coming out, so they're going to put 3 on the gun and 2 on the skirmishers. Oh, that's a hit on the gun, and well, there was a 6 there, so that's a hit on the skirmishers. Okay. The only other shooting is going to be over on the far other flank. So the Hessians can fire a volley, but they'll only get 3 bases at that angle within range of these guys. So 3 bases, volleyed 6, plus the 2 for their commander. So it's a grand total of 8. Hitting on 6s. Wow, that's pretty good shooting. Well, I'll roll that one again. So that's 2 hits. Okay, so 2 hits on Morgan's rifles. They'll fire back. 2 at the 62nd, no hits, and 2 at the Hessians, no hits. Okay, finally, Dearborn's light infantry at the Jaegers. 1 hit on the Jaegers, and the Jaegers firing back with 3 hitting on 6s, no hits. So it's pretty much shared honours. That's all the shooting. Now we go to movement. Okay, so the only movement there is basically the Canadians are going to change facing. So that will pick up a disruption point for them. And Dearborn's light infantry are going to move. So Dearborn's light infantry will move in skirmish formation 12 inches straight back through the woods here. Okay, so now we're up to the melee phase. Now there's a lot of melees going on. There's the one here, one here, one here, and one here. And what I'm going to do is to speed this up because the video's getting long now. I'm going to resolve all the melees, and then I'll give you an update on how it all played out. So the first melee that was concluded was the 20th foot into the flank of the 9th Massachusetts. In this one, the Brits won and wiped the 9th Massachusetts out completely. And so they were lost at a cost of 1 base to the 20th foot. Okay, the next melee that was done was the 24th bayonet charge into the 8th Massachusetts. That resulted in 2 DMZs on the Brits. They got a pushback. The 2 DMZs caused them to lose a base because that took them up to a total of 5. The 8th Massachusetts, they lost a base because they took 2 DMZs. So that automatically takes a base away from them. And they also lose a base because they lost the fight. And then they fell back 6 inches, which placed them going through the 1st Canadian, which inflicted a DMZ on the 1st Canadians and another DMZ on the 8th Massachusetts. Oh, and I should state that, yes, the 24th foot had to do a morale check because they lost the base, as did the 20th foot before. And both the British regiments passed their morale checks for losing bases. So with the 8th Massachusetts being driven back out of Freeman's farm, they then did their morale check. 2 dice because they're only class 3. They failed that, which caused them to break and flee off the table. Because of that, seeing a unit retreat within 3 inches, the 1st Canadians picked up another
3 DMZs. Now, for the first Canadians, they had 1 DMZ for a formation change in the previous movement phase, 1 DMZ for the interpenetration, and 3 DMZs for seeing the friends break. So they lose a base. They do a morale, have to do a morale test. They roll 2d6 because they are graded at training level 3. They failed that, and as a consequence, the first Canadians fled off the table. Okay, so this takes us up to the next melee, which was between the 21st North British Fusiliers and the 2nd Massachusetts. In this one, actually the 2nd Massachusetts held the advantage, and the melee was a 2-to-1 dice roll. Miraculously, however, the Brits rolled a 6, and the 2nd Massachusetts rolled a 3 and a 4. So the Brits won, and the result was a pushback result, which saw 2 DMZs on the Brits, which caused them to lose a base. And the 2nd Massachusetts suffered 2 DMZs and lost a base. But this is where it got really nasty. So now the 2nd Massachusetts is driven back. They go back 6 inches, which places them beyond Freeman's farm and crashing into the side of Dearborn's light infantry. Because Dearborn's light infantry are skirmishers, they can be freely passed through, so they don't pick up a DMZ for the interpenetration. However, the 2nd Massachusetts has to do a 3d6 morale roll for losing the melee. And yes, they lost that dice roll as well, so they break. And that 6 inches takes the 2nd Massachusetts off the table. So now, Dearborn's light infantry suffer 3 DMZs for seeing friends of an equal value flee, which causes them to lose a base and have to do a morale check. At this stage, however, the luck finally turned for the Americans, and Dearborn's light infantry passed their morale check, so they stayed on the table. That leaves just 1 melee to go, which is the combined Grenadiers versus Benedict Arnold and the troops of the 2nd New Hampshire. So the 2nd New Hampshire were victorious in that melee. The combined British Grenadiers, they lost 1 base due to DMZs, and they lost another base because they lost the melee, driven back 6 inches. There were no British units within 3 inches to cause DMZs to be inflicted upon them. They did their morale check, and being first grade, not surprisingly, they passed. So at the end of this turn, the situation we have is we have the 1st and 2nd New Hampshire regiments pretty well ensconced in Coulter's Farm. The British gun actually probably shouldn't be there because they should have had 3 extra DMZs on them. So that gun probably would be gone by now. But other than that, the Loyalist light infantry are still there. A smattering of British light infantry, a much depleted combined Grenadiers, and the 6-pounder gun are holding in front of these 2 fairly strong battalions, but highly demoralised battalions from Paw's Brigade. And that's essentially all that's left from Paw's Brigade. The 24th Foot and Hamilton's Brigade is essentially pushing very hard in the centre. All of Lerner's Brigade has been wiped out. And the only other units from Paw's Brigade that are still left actually are the 3rd Connecticut Militia in this field in here. Dearborn's light infantry to the rear of them, and Morgan's rifles. But they have the Hessians pushing in from the side. So in short, it's looking very, very grim for the Americans. So I'm going to call the game there at this point. I've played enough of it to get what I think is a result now. And I think it's safe to say that this is probably a British victory. And I'm calling this a British victory because the American casualties are extraordinarily high. essentially the best part of, well, an entire brigade and half of another brigade has been wiped out. And they're really, they are holding on to this victory point here, but they have lost Freeman's farm. Okay, they are holding on to Coulter's farm, but in reality, these guys here would have to retreat. They're basically two skirmishing units plus a militia battalion being enveloped on all sides by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 battalions, plus some Hessian Jaegers and some Native Americans, with artillery coming up as well. So yeah, that's the game. Now some of my thoughts on the actual rules themselves, I think. As for the rules themselves, live free or die, I think they give a really good game. There are some things in the rules that I find quite odd, and I think essentially these rules are potentially very good, but they require a bit of a real collegial approach, I think, to the game from both players. There are some holes in them, and they became very apparent to me as I played. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just wrap this video up, and what I'll do is I'll upload another video, actually giving an in-depth review of Live Free or Die, a more concise rules review. I'll just say at the moment, I think that if you're looking for a set of rules that give a good, quick game of the American Revolutionary War period, then I think you would be well served using Live Free or Die, with an understanding that there's going to be some situations that these rules will not cover due to their brevity, but nothing that two people playing in a collegial manner couldn't overcome. So yeah, that's it for now, and by all means, like, share, and leave any comments in the comment section below. I'd really be interested to hear what you think. Until next time, Ubiquay.